And joining us now, Pennsylvania Congressman and member of the House Oversight Committee, Scott Perry, and Texas Congressman and Doge Caucus co-chair Pete Sessions. Congressman Sessions, I first want to get your reaction to what we saw at CPAC, the chainsaw, and then, of course, this idea that maybe we should be giving some of the savings from Doge in checks back to the American people. A lot of debate whether that's a good idea or not.
Well, I can help with that debate, and that is the Treasury Department is not prepared to give the money back to the correct people. The last time we went through this exercise, over $400 billion ended up going the wrong places because the data that Treasury, the IRS, and other people work off of is incorrect data. So it's my hope that we'll measure this 3 times and saw once and not do that.
Congressman Sessions, I just want to follow up on that real quick because you're saying it is logistically maybe impossible to do, but just as a matter of policy, would you prefer to see this dividend in the form of checks or getting it to the American people, or do you agree with Speaker Johnson that it's best to use that to pay down the debt?
Well, I think overwhelmingly you'd find members of Congress who think that what we are trying to do is to relieve the country of debt. So from a pure philosophy perspective, I would not be for sending the money out back. We should pay down the debt. We should not take out more money. But the bottom line is that we are not even prepared, if we did decide to do it correctly. And this is one thing that Scott Perry and myself have spent so much time in government reform and oversight with our young chairman, James Comer, to let the American people know that government is unprepared to effectively handle the business that we think they ought to be prepared for. And that's why we're delighted Donald Trump won.
Well, and certainly the idea that this money should go back down to pay the debt seems to be, frankly, maybe a better idea overall as we're dealing with $36 trillion and change. And, Congressman Perry, I want to talk about what happened overnight last night. And of course, that was the Senate. The vote-a-rama ended at 5 a.m. this morning, $340 billion budget bill. But it looks like President Trump really put kind of a hiccup in all of this because he's throwing it back to the House. He wants the House to do that one big, beautiful bill versus what the Senate's trying to do here, which is 2 bills. I want to ask you about that, and also the fact that Senator Rand Paul, he was a no. He says, if you've got $36 trillion in debt, why are we spending all of this money on border and other things? Maybe we need to be a little more fiscally responsible.
Well, I think to a certain extent, we all agree with Senator Paul. We've got to get this government right-sized, and it's not that we don't want to do what needs to be done on the border. Of course, that's part of the president's agenda. We want to support that. We want to support the president's agenda for the military, but we also want to support the president's agenda that says that prices are too high, interest rates are too high, and the only thing that's going to bring those interest rates and those prices down is for the federal government to quit spending as much money as it does. Every 100 days, borrowing another $1 trillion. Senator Paul gets that. Quite honestly, most of the other senators get that. The House members get that. It comes down to difficult choices. I think like Pete and probably everybody else, we don't care if it's one big, beautiful bill, 2 bills, 10 bills, whatever it is. We need to do it, that we enact the president's agenda and do it quickly, get some wins for the American people, and get this thing moving. So the Senate's got a plan. The House has a plan. We got a couple fallback plans if neither one of those worked. But what we can't do is have the Democrats hijack this thing and increase the spending, increase the interest rates, and increase the cost of living while we're trying to make sure we secure the border and secure our country.
Congressman Perry, tying that back into our previous discussion as well about modernization, that might be an area for some meaningful investment, because I just sit here agog. I'm just blown away by how old so much of the technology, you can't even almost call it technology, that the government is operating on, like 50-plus-year-old technology. It's crazy. No business, no household does that anymore, but the government does it across the board in so many spaces. That seems nuts to people, I feel like.
Well, it is nuts to people. And of course, you're talking with the Secretary of Transportation, Duffy, about what's called next gen. Yet it was next gen when I showed up in Congress over 10 years ago, and now it's some other gen, and that's not even in place yet. And we got people in peril in the skies, and it's because we can't get it together in these agencies. Meanwhile, again, every 100 days we borrow another $1 trillion. People get that government is inefficient. They understand that, but there's a point where they can't take it anymore, and we are at that point.
All right, let's move on to another topic here. And this is certainly going back to this issue of waste and fraud and how to root out said waste and fraud. House Oversight Committee is going to reveal the high-risk agencies for waste. It's going to be a hearing next week. And what the plan is here, Congressman Sessions, is to really identify, line-by-line items, if you will, of where we are losing money, whether it's the FAA, whether it's the IRS, whether it is Treasury, so on and so forth. What do you think the goal of these hearings really should be, and that transparency, again, that the American people are frankly asking for?
Well, this is a complete follow-up to the hearing which we held last year that not only did Congressman Perry attend, but many other members, and they heard that the GAO said that they could certify $1.7 trillion worth of waste, fraud, and abuse that occurred essentially over a 3-year period of time. And I asked the question as the subcommittee chairman, what will it be like 2 years from now? And they said, oh, it would be higher. But you see, there's a lot of work that not only Congressman Perry and I have done, but we in government reform, and one of them is to run databases of people who have died, to run databases against Social Security, against the Veterans Administration. And this is one of the things that these large databases simply have not been utilized. They were told, well, it's against the law. We're not going to do those things. Employees have been at home and incapable of running large databases and getting information that would allow them to look for waste, fraud, and abuse. They simply look for what benefits they could put out. So expect us to go through this high-risk series and to ask questions not just about the military, not just about housing, the traditional areas, but also some non-traditional areas, and expect that they will come up with answers now that are possible from the management about databases that will glean information that will make us alert to changes in the marketplace and people who've been cashing checks for a long, long time.
Congressman Perry, briefly and finally, I just want to get your reaction to comments from one of your colleagues, Congresswoman Crockett from Texas. She was on a podcast, and she was asked about waste, fraud, and abuse in DOJ. She said she doesn't think there is a lot of waste in the federal government. What do you say?
Well, she sits on the same committee that Pete and I do, and I can tell her, as a guy in the Transportation Committee that deals with federal building, the General Services Agency that manages all those federal buildings has an occupancy rate of their own building of 9%. That means 91% of the space is unutilized, yet we pay the bill every single month, every single year, and that's just one of most of them of the headquarters in Washington, D.C. lie generally dormant and empty, yet we pay for them. The waste is rampant, whether she wants to believe it or not, and we're not against government employees. They're doing hard work and they're doing necessary work, but there's no reason to pay for them to be at home and pay for an empty building. If you're not going to go to the building, then let's divest it and let's have the taxpayer quit paying for it, and let's sell it to somebody that can use it.
All right, maybe you can have that conversation with her in a committee meeting at some point. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Thanks for coming on.